Okay, I'm going to prove that TempleOS is 100% open source. So I'm going to go to my website, go to the downloads page. We want to download the ultra small 2 meg version. Now we go to VMware, new virtual machine, typical. We want downloads, ultra small 2 meg, other 64-bit. We call it ultra small, 8 gig for the disk. Now we customize the hardware. Let's give it 5 gig of RAM. I'm going to give it 8 cores. And you know what I'm going to do just to prove? I'm going to disable the network. I'm going to remove the network adapter. TempleOS doesn't have networking. Let's do that and finish. We install onto hard drive. Yes, we are in VMware. Hit a key. So right now it's copying 2 meg onto the C partition and 2 meg onto the D partition. I keep my 2 partitions identical. My master is the C and my backup is the D. And during the day I copy a snapshot to my backup. And if I ever make my drive unbootable, then I boot the D drive and fix it. Okay, so it just installed onto the C and the D. Now we're going to reboot. This is my bootloader. This replaces Grub. I made my own. So we want the C drive 1. Okay, so this is the tiny distro. So there's only one application as a demo. This is an 8-core flight simulator. Eagle dive, you're supposed to dive for fish. The 8 cores are, CPU loads are in the corner here. Anyway, so this is not DOS. If I can say unassemble function, print, and this is 64-bit. This is ring 0 only, and it's identity mapped. So what I'm going to do is prove that it's 100% open source. So I'm going to delete the binaries and then recompile. So first of all, I'm going to reformat my D drive. I made my own formatter. It'll do FAT32 or Red C. So look, so C is there and D is gone. Now I'm going to go to my C drive, find file, starting at root, looking for bin. So we have kernel bin. This is left over from the CD-ROM. My master boot loader, my old boot record, my compiler bin, and my kernel bin. So I'm going to go Control D. We're going to delete kernel bin. We're going to delete compiler bin. We're going to delete kernel bin. So now we have find file. And we don't have any bins. Okay, so at this point we have compiled 44,000 lines. That's during boot. It compiles during boot. It loads the bootloader, and then the bootloader loads the kernel.bin, and then kernel.bin loads a compiler, and then then it starts compiling at OS start in the root directory. And this includes some headers from kernel and compiler, and then it calls make atom. So right now, let's look at an overview. There's 80,000 lines of code on this distro, and The compiler is 20,000, the kernel is 24,000, and then the Atom directory is the 35,000. So this 44 is the Atom directory plus some headers. The header from the kernel, 4,000 for the kernel, and the header for the compiler, another the header's another 400. Anyway, so the kernel, the compiler has a project file. This loads the this includes the files, and the kernel has a project file which includes the files, and the kernel also does a configuration during when you compile the kernel. It also configures. So what we're going to do now is make OS install. So this does a make all, which compiles the compiler and compiles the kernel, and then it patches the boot sector so that the boot sector knows where the kernel is, because the boot sector doesn't navigate. Anyway, so make OS, we're going to compile, we're going to make OS and install the boot sector. This is going to be the C drive. Now on this disk is a C and a D, so the first is C, and we want 2 for ATA hard disk, probe. We want 4 for ATA. You can either enter the port, or if it's got a number, a little 1-digit number, you enter the 1-digit number. And no more drives. We could make the CD-ROM available. Anyway, no disk cache, and no options. So now look, now it says 92,000. So what that means is it just compiled the kernel in the compiler. Now if we do find file /bin star, now we have the kernel and compiler are present again. Okay, so now let's reboot. So everything works. So let's go to the root directory. Let's do a directory. So let's do directory star. We're going to do a full directory. This gives the cluster number. So it had to put the cluster number of kernel.bin into the boot sector. Okay, now during boot, it compiles the Atom directory in your home directory. The Atom directory is done with a make. Let's change. In the Atom directory is make Atom, and this runs during boot. So what we're going to do is we're going to echo. The compiler is going to display the code that it's compiling with echo on. Now we do reboot. Drive C. Now it compiles 100,000 lines a second, and there's 40,000 lines in Atom, and there's 50,000 lines in the compiler and the kernel. Anyway, so so let's go ahead and anyway, so it compiled 42,000 lines. I'm going to just get rid of that. So we go to Start OS and we turn off the echo. Okay, so let's see what's on here in the Atom directory. So what did it compile? There's the autocomplete stuff. There's the document, the editor, this tree widget. The sprites are done in documents. There's God stuff. This file manager is in here. There's a check disk. There's that reformat. That's in the kernel. There's a graphics library. There's optional stuff. The boot sector, the DVD boot sector's here. The hard disk boot sector's here. This will make an ISO file, and And then we have some utilities. There's grep. There's a grep. There's a thing to make HTML. This is the sound directory. We just have PC speaker. Anyway, so I just want to show you that I can make sprites. You already saw the eagle dive. So I'm going to draw a couple circles. This is graphics mode, by the way. It's not text mode. 640 by 480. God said it's a covenant. These are just some sprites. It does. I did dithered color, flood fill. So this is just to show that it is indeed graphics mode. Anyway, so now we're gonna go to the home directory, and we're gonna make a distro. Okay, so this copies onto this makes a temporary directory called distro, and then that's a staging area, and then we copy all the trees into there, and then we make the ISO file. So this is where it compiles it. You remember I said that there was it's copying and compiling. It's only 2 meg. So now if we go Control D, there's a kernel.bin in the boot 00. That's what that's from. And if we change to the root directory, do a directory, now we have this mydistro.iso. So if we you can get that out of your distribution by mounting. Okay, I didn't get this to work. I don't know. I tried this a little bit earlier. You get permissions issues. Anyway, mount disk. Oh, you know what I want to do? Let me make a terminal and change mod 777 -r star. I'm not a big fan of file permissions. I'm going to do sudo. Okay, I don't know if that did it. Anyway, so VMware Ultra. Now it's supposed to show 2 partitions. I don't know why it's not showing 2 partitions. The C and the D. Maybe the D is just too empty. Anyway, the mount point is VM disk. So it's not going to mount. I think maybe I have to change sudo. This is not going to work. I'm not a... Okay, maybe it'll work. It worked. Or did it? I don't know what it did. Anyway, currently mounted. So now I go to my mount directory. Okay, so these are all my files. So we can copy this distro file. Wow, I don't know how we got so lucky. Oh, it's the C distro. It's the C drive. Okay, now I have to warn you that if you delete files, it's going to get corrupted because I don't do short FAT32 file names. Anyway, so we have an ISO file. So I'm going to copy this to my temp directory, and then I'm going to mount it. I think you can mount it as one of these. If you want to burn a CD-ROM, you say write to disk with the ISO. Let's try one of these. Let's see what this does. Okay, so that didn't work. I'm using an old format for okay. Anyway, there's a way you can open ISO files. Oh well. Now what I do for I'm gonna unmount this I hate file permissions, to be quite honest. I used to use Windows. I switched over. It works pretty good. I'm pretty happy, I guess. Just not a fan of file permissions. You can tell I made a Ring Zero operating system. Anyway, so what I do is I have some scripts for mounting, VM mount. And this uses a utility VM mount. VMware costs about $250. Finally, they fixed the sound on it. So this mounts my D drive. I always use my D and not my C, because my C is my master, and my D, it's okay if it gets corrupted. I just reformat and recopy. When you recopy the D, you have to do the install boot. You have to do the make install onto the D, if you want to use it if you want to make it bootable. Anyway, I was going to say, on my website you can find all these scripts. You go to TAD files and bin, and here's these VMware scripts. Here's QEMU scripts for mounting and stuff like that. Be careful, they're from my setup. Anyway, you can download those. It's on my website under TAD files. Anyway, how about that?